Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
This is the land where nothing changes, a land of red buses and blue-blooded babies. This is the place where pensioners are raped and their hearts are being cut from the welfare state. Let the poor drink the milk while the rich eat the honey. Let the bums count their blessings while they count the money.
So, David Cameron has insisted he will not back down on plans to cut tax credits, despite concerns from within his own ranks that millions of working families will be left worse off. The Prime Minister was keen to convey an image of common ground at the opening day of the Tory conference in Manchester, as angry protesters rallied outside, demonstrating against austerity and benefit cuts. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
Manchester, a tale of two politics. Outside the conference security zone, tens of thousands marched against cuts, privatisations, and they heaped abuse on the Tory faithful.
You see them shouting scum, you see us just trying to have a conference, just trying to discuss important issues to the country, just trying to get on with our jobs.
I take inspiration from Margaret Thatcher in The Ladies Not for Turning. I'm not for turning from these socialist nutters.
Inside, away from the egg-throwing and heckling, the Tories relived an election victory some had feared they would never see.
But I think this is the sweetest victory of all.
Well, Willie Whitelaw once said that it would be quite wrong to gloat, absolutely wrong to gloat, but got to tell you, I'm gloating like hell. I don't think we are on this occasion because...
Oh, that's not convincing.
Well, they're genuinely speaking.
Before the marchers hit the streets, David Cameron was asked about one of the most controversial cuts of his new majority government. A cut in tax credits brought in at the same time as the move to a living wage, which experts say will leave more than 3 million low-paid worse off and 1 million households £1,300 a year worse off.
At the time of the autumn statement, will you have another look at this issue?
No, we think the changes we put forward are right, and they come with higher pay and lower taxes.
Hours on a weekend, 8 till 8.
The Prime Minister later visited a GP's surgery. In the interview, he'd refused to deny an accusation by the former Tory Treasurer Lord Ashcroft that he'd been offered a big government job after giving the party £8 million over many years. He also refused to give a direct answer about whether he'd misled people about when he knew Lord Ashcroft's tax status.
You're not going to move on tax credits, are you?
George Osborne's braced for a week of speculation about his chances of succeeding David Cameron. The Sunday Times today suggested that 18 Tory MPs have discussed the possibility of running for the succession after David Cameron.
A Labour leader who promotes defenders of the IRA, who speaks up for Hamas, who puts the case for Hezbollah, who raises his voice on behalf of those anti-Western, anti-British, anti-Semitic extremists, and yet who cannot bear to open his mouth to honour our war dead, is never, never going to be able to keep this country safe, secure and free.
The Tories are convinced that Jeremy Corbyn's election as Labour leader is a massive electoral asset for them. A money printing stall setting the tone for a conference that's been told it mustn't look smug, but feels politics is moving its way.
And Gary joins us now live from Manchester. The top lines today have been a bit odd, as sort of no news, David Cameron doesn't change his mind. Is the government's line on tax credits as hard as it seems?
Well, they seem quite content for that line to be out there, quite a harsh line. It might make them look a bit brutal. I understand behind the scenes the Treasury is, according to one person who's had some detailed talks with them, knowing all too well what the problem is with the people who are going to be victims of tax credits. I understand that behind the scenes there is quite an effort going on to look at ways of mitigating this. You get a whisper of that talking to ministers, but David Cameron and George Osborne don't want anyone to go near there. They're in the middle of a spending round. This is an extremely tense negotiation, eyeball to eyeball stuff. They don't want to look like they can be turned over for the purposes of a spending round or anything else. And they also don't know quite what, if anything, there will be spare to help the victims of the tax credit changes. So for a lot of reasons, they're quite content for the harsh tone to be out there. And it may be they can't do anything, but I can tell you, I'm pretty sure they are looking at things.
What about the demo going on outside? I mean, is it very new politics?
Yes, I was talking to a senior aide to the Prime Minister who said there had been conversations with the Prime Minister and others where they'd said to each other ahead of this conference a while ago that they were just a bit worried that over the course of this Parliament there might be, there wasn't today, real violence on the streets. And that would portray a very divided country, would hurt the narrative of the Conservative Party. And it does go through their minds that that is where we could end up. So I think they were probably looking out the windows just a little worried about what this might foreshadow.
Thanks, Gary. So there was little sign this afternoon of the new politics as angry scenes broke out at the anti-austerity protests outside Tory conference. Our political correspondent Michael Crick was mingling.
The police said 60,000. Some marchers said it was more than that. And for some reason, there were quite a few pigs out today as well, protesting against the Conservative Party and its government.
The sea of placards and banners behind me make it clear this march is about all sorts of different issues. Austerity, benefits cuts, the environment, war, cannabis even. But above all, the government's trade union bill, which will make it a lot harder for unions to fund the Labour Party and harder for unions to go on strike.
But many seem to ignore Jeremy Corbyn's denunciation last week of personal attacks and his call for a gentler, kinder politics. These Conservative members were surrounded by people calling them Tory scum, and one was hit by an egg.
Cleaned up inside.
I'll go to the Radisson, I'll think you've got something there.
What's happened to the kinder, gentler politics that Jeremy Corbyn mentioned? It's class war. They started it. It's class war. They started it. So you don't want a kinder, gentler politics? No. But haven't the public decided they want a Conservative government to continue austerity?
Not us.
You lost the election.
Well, we're fighting.
So you want to overturn the election result?
No, we want another election.
What's another election?
Oh yeah, definitely. We want it now. Soon.
This is not a majority government. We're supposed to be in a majority.
There never is a majority government.
This government has not received the mandate to carry out the awful cuts, especially in terms of social care that is brought about over the past 5 years.
Isn't this a bit personal, these piggies?
Isn't what the Tories do a bit personal? You know, they're killing people. That's a bit personal to the people whose families are affected by cuts, by the people whose care's been cut, by carers who have to care for their families.
Last week, Jeremy Corbyn talked about a kinder, gentler politics. You're not interested in that?
Do I look like Labour?
Later, as I tried to enter the conference, I was surrounded by protesters and afterwards found I'd been spat at. The march was aggressive, but largely peaceful. But the activities of maybe only a few score will play into the hands of their Conservative opponents.
Let's talk a little bit about domestic politics while we can. What difference do you think Jeremy Corbyn has made to your party's position?
I think what we're seeing from Jeremy Corbyn as leader, but the broader Labour Party, to my mind, is a real regression back to a kind of politics and policies that we haven't really seen since the 1980s, and debates coming back on the table that I think most people thought we'd found sensible answers to already. There's a big protest happening outside the conference hall right now, and of course it's turned very nasty. People have been spat at trying to get into the conference, and this is not the way we run politics in Britain.
So why do you think those hundreds of thousands of people who are behind this movement feel so cut out of Britain? Why are they so excluded from Britain's economic growth?
I'm not sure that these are people who particularly feel excluded from Britain's economic growth. These are people who have what I believe is quite a narrow left-wing, very hard left-wing view of how our country should be run. It's a version of left-wing politics, Labour politics, that hasn't been really fashionable since the 1980s. And the reason why is because it fails.
Justine Greening.
The Metro. spitting hatred as Yob's ambush Tory conference. There were 4 arrests in this march of 60,000 people in Manchester today, organised by the TUC. Some eggs were thrown at some of the people attending the conference, and also journalists copped some verbal abuse and were spat at as well. I wonder if that's why it's on the front page.
If you want to get on the front page, spit at a journalist, I think it seems to be.
Don't encourage people.
No, I wouldn't encourage it, but it does. It's been very heavily taken up, this story, and some sort of household names like Michael Crick of Channel 4, formerly of the BBC, and some other journalists have been spat at, and the story has been reported in a way that this is a kind of a sort of left out of control, the angry left-wingers gathering outside the Tory conference, touting Tory scum and spitting at people. As you say, there's only 4 arrests. They weren't representative of, one would assume, of the 60,000 people who marched perfectly peacefully and within their rights to march outside the conference. But it does feed into this narrative that the left wing is out of control and angry, and it really needs to be shut down by the sort of figureheads, people like Jeremy Corbyn, and Frances O'Grady came out today and condemned it, which she needs to do again and again, I think, to stop this taking hold, this narrative.
There's been a lot of condemnation of this sort of antisocial behaviour on Twitter, actually, hasn't there?
There has, but Twitter is in and of itself a place where antisocial attitudes, if nothing else, are fostered. A lot of misogyny and that kind of abuse on Twitter, a lot of abuse of all kinds on Twitter. I have to say, a lot of it coming, in my experience, and perhaps unsurprisingly, from left-wingers. And there does seem to be this idea at large in the left that because they apparently have a monopoly of good intentions, that they can be deeply personally unpleasant to people. Well, and that doesn't help our political discourse.
And a lot of people are saying that's absolutely not the case. Very quickly.
To be a Tory at the moment, Mr. Osborne?
Well, look, those protesters are essentially part of a big trade union march. The trade unions support the Labour Party, pay for the Labour Party. They've just bought the leadership of the Labour Party. So it's not really surprising they don't like the Conservative Party. But I draw strength on the fact that 11 million people voted Conservative at the last general election up and down the country. And, these aren't the people who necessarily go on the marches and have a trade union to represent them, or a pressure group that comes on LBC to fight on their behalf. These are just hard-working people getting up, getting on with life, going to work, and these are the people that we're fighting for.